Welcome to Hot Soup Stories. Leela stared at the apartment key like it might bite her. Cheap rent. Perfect, she whispered to herself. And by perfect, she meant cheap, suspiciously cheap, and located in a building that smelled like someone had died in it, or maybe several someones. The door creaked open like it hadn't been opened in decades, or it was just mocking her. She stepped inside, dragging her boxes behind her. The air hit her like a wet sock, musty, sour, and vaguely judgmental. Ah, home sweet, nope. Definitely not sweet, she muttered. The apartment was small, cozy in the kind of way that screams, I've got secrets, and none of them are good. The windows let in sunlight, but somehow it only made the dust more visible. Leela wrinkled her nose and dropped the first box. Maybe tomorrow, she thought, she'd unpack. Or maybe she'd just burn the place down. Night fell, and with night came the whispers. Leela, Leela. She froze, her first thought. Her neighbors were extremely polite but very persistent. Second thought, maybe the wind was trying to speak to her. Third thought, nope. That was definitely a voice. A shadow flickered at the corner of her eye. She spun. Nothing, just the wall. Calm down, Leela, it's probably, oh, no, definitely not nothing. By day 3, the apartment had made it clear. It was alive, or possessed, or maybe just very, very dramatic. Doors slammed without wind, lights flickered like the building was having mood swings, and sometimes objects moved on their own. Once, a book slid across the floor like it was late for work. Then came the first real scare. Leela was brushing her teeth when she caught a reflection in the mirror. Something or someone was behind her. She spun. Empty. Okay, she muttered. Maybe I should start carrying pepper spray or a priest or a flamethrower. She had barely begun to unpack when she found the first clue. A diary, wedged between floorboards, dustier than a mummy's closet. The first entry read, "The shadows are clever, they want to play, and they don't like losing." Leela laughed nervously. Great, I just moved in with a sadistic raccoon. But as night fell, she realized it wasn't a raccoon. It was something smarter, hungrier, and slightly evil, and she had to survive it, preferably without wetting herself. Leela didn't sleep that night. Honestly, she wasn't sure she'd ever sleep again. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the walls, every mysterious whisper sounded like the apartment itself was chuckling at her panic. Leela, Leela. Her first instinct, run. Her second instinct, hide under the blanket. Her third instinct, maybe the blanket wasn't enough. By morning, she had discovered something unsettling. The apartment wasn't just haunted, it was judgmental. Tiny scratches on the floor spelled words like, leave or stay forever, preferably stay forever. She shivered and laughed nervously. Great, a building that's clingy and passive-aggressive, exactly what I wanted in life. Determined to figure out what she'd signed up for, Leela dug through dusty cabinets and found a stash of old letters from past tenants. One screamed help, another read like a Yelp review written by a ghost, and one was just a shopping list. Apparently, Eleanor, a former tenant, had tried reasoning with the apartment. Dear apartment, please stop moving my furniture. Love, Eleanor. The shadows didn't like that joke, by the way. That night they came closer, real close. She could feel them brushing against her arms, legs, hair. It was like being hugged by something very cold, very hungry, and very passive-aggressively sinister. She tried talking back. Hey, can you not? Some of us have rent to pay. No response, just whispers, just movement. The shadows were growing bolder, they had personality, they had attitude, and they were hungry. By day 3, Leela was ready to fight. She grabbed every object she could find. Broom, chair, mirror, a half-empty bottle of soda. Hey, it was heavy. The apartment responded immediately, doors slammed, lights flickered, and the shadows swirled in an angry storm. The mirrors were the worst. Every time she glanced at one, she saw shapes behind her. Faceless, floating figures, their limbs twisting in ways that violated basic physics. She jumped, spun, and accidentally whacked herself in the face with the broom. "Ow, you too, huh?" she muttered, rubbing her forehead. Then she had an idea. Mirrors. Shadows hated mirrors. She placed every reflective surface she could find in a defensive line. The shadows hissed, recoiled, and for a fleeting moment, Leela felt clever. "Ha, beat you at your own game, jerk," she whispered to the air. But the apartment wasn't done. The walls pulsed, floorboards groaned, and whispers grew louder, almost chanting her name. Leela realized something terrifying. The apartment wasn't just mischievous, it was smart. It remembered Elena. It remembered everyone, and now it remembered her. The shadows surged toward her, fast this time. She dodged, swung her broom, threw a chair, and screamed something that probably sounded like a curse in every language ever invented. Then came the first touch, icy, firm, and absolutely terrifying. One shadow wrapped around her ankle. She kicked. Another latched onto her shoulder. She screamed, yelled, and somehow managed to run. She slipped behind the kitchen counter, breathless, and realized something important. Humor and fear were now her weapons. Laughing at the absurdity of her situation made the shadows hesitate. Fear alone fueled them. Humor, maybe it slowed them down. "You think you're scary? I've lived through Tinder dates worse than you," she shouted. The shadows paused, and for the first time, Leela felt like maybe she had a fighting chance. But she knew the apartment wasn't done. It was patient, and it was hungry. Leela woke up in a puddle of her own panic. Her blanket had somehow ended up over her head, twisted like it was mocking her. The apartment, apparently, had a sense of humor too, though decidedly dark. The shadows had become organized. Not just creepy silhouettes anymore. They were plotting. Tiny tendrils snaked along the walls, poking, prodding, and occasionally smacking a stray picture frame just to remind her who was in charge. "Okay, new plan," she muttered to herself, brushing imaginary sweat from her forehead. "If they want to fight, they've got one. But let's be smart like a ninja. A sarcastic, very scared ninja." Her first attempt at defense was modest. A broom, a couple of chairs, and sheer attitude. She swung the broom at a shadow and it squealed or hissed, or possibly just thought she was annoying. Either way, it recoiled. Score 1 for Layla. But the apartment wasn't playing games. The walls started moving subtly. Not dramatically, no, that would be too polite, but just enough that she tripped over corners that hadn't existed a second ago. She nearly fell into a closet that had apparently decided it wanted a roommate. "Oh, haha, very funny apartment. Seriously, I could be on YouTube with this level of horror comedy," she muttered, tripping over nothing and swinging her broom wildly. The shadows laughed, or at least they made something suspiciously like laughter, a low hiss that sounded like, "We're going to get you anyway." Leela's fight-or-flight instincts kicked in with a heavy dose of sarcasm. She ran toward the living room mirror. The shadows surged after her, tendrils grabbing at her ankles, her hair, her sanity. She glanced into the mirror and smirked. "Ah, you can't touch me here. Mirrors are my friends. Mirrors are my friends." Sure enough, the shadows recoiled from their own reflections, twisting awkwardly like angry spaghetti. Leela used the moment to set up a barricade of reflective surfaces. Mirrors, a shiny toaster, even a slightly polished frying pan. "Eat it, shadows, shine on you crazy diamonds," she yelled. The apartment groaned. The ceiling sagged slightly. And then the whispers turned into voices, mocking, snide, and very clearly annoyed at her antics. "Stop yelling, you're giving us headaches. Do you always talk back to your landlords?" Leela laughed nervously. Humor, she realized, was her secret weapon. The apartment could be scary, but it hated being mocked. Every sarcastic insult made the shadows hesitate. "You call this a haunting? My last ex was scarier." "You're basically a tiny, panicked comedian trapped in a very haunted comedy club," another shadow hissed. She grabbed the broom and swung at a particularly aggressive shadow, sending it spiraling backward into a mirror. Cracks appeared, Not in the mirror, surprisingly, but in the shadow itself. Score 2 for Layla. But the apartment wasn't done. It tried new tricks. The floorboards shifted, the ceiling stretched, and suddenly the living room was twice as long. The shadows multiplied, forming hundreds of writhing, faceless figures. Leela sighed, brushing dust off her clothes. Okay, maybe I'm slightly outnumbered, slightly, but remember, humor is tactical. And tactical it was. She started taunting them, using absurd insults, awkward dance moves, and even imitating the shadows. Somehow it worked. The shadows faltered, recoiling from both the mirrors and her ridiculous antics. Then she heard it, a whisper in her ear, closer than ever. You think you can survive us? You're nothing without fear. Leela turned to face it. Guess what? I've survived Monday mornings, awkward family dinners, and 30-second TikTok dance challenges. You're going down, buddy. The shadows paused. The apartment's pulse slowed. And in that brief, glorious moment, Leela realized something vital. She could fight back and maybe even win. Leela's strategy was simple. Fear plus humor equals survival. If the apartment fed on terror, then sarcasm, absurdity, and a little reckless bravado might just starve it for a few precious minutes. She grabbed a broom, a frying pan, and a spray bottle of window cleaner, because reflective surfaces plus cleaning solution might just confuse the shadows. Or at least that was her theory. The apartment greeted her like an annoyed cat. Shadows slithered along the walls, their tendrils twitching, whispering nasty things. You can't survive us. We're everywhere. Stop hitting us with kitchenware. Leela spun dramatically, swinging her broom like a sword. Oh yeah, what are you gonna do, tickle me to death? For a moment, nothing happened. Then a shadow shot forward, long and snake-like. She dodged, tripped over a floorboard that had decided to shift just for fun, and yelled. Seriously, can we get some consistent architecture here? The shadows hissed in confusion. Leela pressed her advantage. Mirrors and reflective surfaces were her allies, and she lined up every shiny object she could find. The shadows recoiled, twisting violently. She laughed. Oh, you hate mirrors, don't you? Classic. Suddenly, a tendril lashed out and grabbed her ankle. Leela kicked. The broom slipped from her hands and flew across the room, knocking over a small mirror, which created a dazzling flash. The shadows shrieked, flailing, their momentum interrupted. "Ha, take that, faceless spaghetti monsters," she yelled. But the apartment was nothing if not persistent. The walls groaned, floorboards creaked, and the shadows regrouped, forming larger, more menacing shapes. One shadow surged toward her with unnatural speed, twisting and writhing like a nightmare origami sculpture. Leela remembered Aliner's diary and took a deep breath. Fear fueled the apartment and humor weakened it. So she taunted, danced, and dodged in equal measure. She swung the frying pan like a baton, sprayed reflective surfaces, and shouted, "Is that all you've got? I've survived my mother-in-law's cooking and a clown at a birthday party." The shadows hesitated. Then one taller, angrier, more determined, lunged straight at her. Leela ducked, rolled, and kicked a nearby chair. It toppled into a shadow, scattering its form into writhing fragments. Score. Daniel, her reluctant sidekick, appeared with a flashlight, shining it directly into the shadows. They shrieked, recoiling from both light and reflection. "See, teamwork," Leela shouted, barely dodging a shadowy hand that swiped her hair. The apartment groaned, pulsing like it had a migraine. "You cannot beat me. I am eternal." "Yeah, well, I'm stubborn and slightly ridiculous," Leela shouted back. She grabbed the diary, flipping to the page that mentioned the mirrors. "All right, apartment, time for your timeout." She lined up every reflective object she could find in a chaotic barricade, shining light, reflecting surfaces, and swinging frying pans like a bizarre, terrifying dance. The shadows shrieked, shrank, and faltered. Finally, with a combined push, mirrors, cleaning spray, and a very sarcastic chant of insults, the apartment seemed to pause. The pulse slowed. The whispers softened. For the first time, Leela realized, maybe, just maybe, she could survive this. But the apartment had one last trick. The front door, which had seemed straightforward before, suddenly warped. It stretched, elongated, and twisted. The shadows surged one final time, reaching, grasping, hissing. "You will stay forever." Leela squared her shoulders, wiped dust off her face, and shouted, "Not today, creep, not today." She sprinted, dodging shadows, swinging frying pan and broom with equal bravado, straight for the warped door. Daniel followed, flashlight bouncing wildly. And as she reached the door, Leela realized one thing. The apartment was smart, relentless, and she was slightly insane. Perfect ingredients for victory. Leela's heart pounded. She was exhausted, bruised, and covered in a fine layer of dust and shame. The apartment's shadows loomed around her, taller, angrier, and clearly offended by her sarcasm. "You cannot escape," the apartment hissed, vibrating through the walls, floors, and ceiling. "You will belong to me forever." Leela wiped sweat from her brow, holding a frying pan in one hand and a bottle of reflective cleaning spray in the other. She glanced at Daniel, who looked like he regretted ever agreeing to this adventure. "Seriously, Daniel, why did I bring you into this?" "Because," he panted, "someone had to help you not die." Leela smirked. "Yeah, great, I feel safer already." The shadows surged forward, writhing and hissing, but Leela had a plan. Sort of. She lined up all the mirrors and reflective objects she could find, pointing them strategically like a general deploying troops. The apartment recoiled. "What is this absurdity?" it groaned. "Exactly," Leela shouted. "Absurdity is my superpower." She swung the frying pan at a shadow that lunged too close, scattering it into shimmering fragments. Daniel sprayed light and cleaner, causing another wave of shadows to flail and shriek. "You think you're clever," the apartment bellowed, walls bending, floorboards shifting, corners folding like origami nightmares. "I'm clever and sarcastic," Leela shot back, flipping her hair dramatically. "And don't underestimate the power of someone who survived a Zoom meeting with Corinne from HR." The apartment groaned louder, pulsing violently. Shadows surged in a final attempt to drag her into the walls. Leela took a deep breath, held up the diary, and shouted, "You're going to learn a lesson in irony today." She started taunting the shadows mercilessly. "Come on, you spooky spaghetti monsters. I've fought bigger things, like my student loan statements." The shadows hesitated. The apartment pulsed unevenly, as if in pain. Its own creations, reflections of itself, were striking back. Mirrors shattered in some places, but the chaos worked in her favor. Leela and Daniel dodged, weaved, and swung with a mix of bravado and desperation. Finally, she spotted it, the heart of the apartment's hunger. A dark, pulsing void in the living room, thrumming like it was alive. She sprinted toward it, holding a mirror in front of her and shouting, "Face yourself, apartment, you're ridiculous." The void flinched, shadows shrieked, and then, with a final surge of energy, Leela shoved the mirror directly at the heart. Light exploded across the room. The shadows twisted violently, screamed, and dissolved into nothingness. The apartment trembled, groaned, and finally went silent. The pulse stopped. The walls stopped moving. The air cleared. Leela collapsed, laughing nervously, crying, and wiping soot off her face. "Well, that was fun. 10 out of 10. Would not recommend." Daniel shook his head. "You actually did it. You defeated it." "Temporarily," Leela said, picking up the diary. "These things are like glitter. You think it's gone, but it always comes back when you least expect it." She stepped outside into the sunlight, blinking. The street was calm, normal. No shadows, no whispers, no angry walls, just life. Birds chirping. A neighbor mowing their lawn. Leela turned back once, smirked, and muttered, "You tried, apartment. But I'm the sarcastic, slightly insane hero of this story. And heroes always survive eventually." And with that, she walked away, ready to find a new apartment, preferably one without a pulse, attitude, or taste for fear. The shadows had been defeated for now.